how's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 5 of What If Deku Stayed Quirkless. And now, before I start this What If off, I would just like to say that this is either the last or the second to last part of this series, so I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you all know what a last part of a series means, that means a new series is going to come out right after that. So, in order for me to get some ideas for what the new series should be, please comment your what if suggestions down in the comment sections below. And if you see a what if that someone else commented that you like, please like that comment so I know that you guys want to see me make a video about that what if. So yeah, if you see a what if that you like, please like that comment, or if you just want to comment down what your what if suggestion is, please do that. And now let's get right into this video. Nezu, do you think this world is ready for a quirkless hero? Because I don't think so. Izuku, what do you mean? Nezu would counter. Well, I just don't really think they'd want a quirkless hero yet. Sure, there was the select few people that were cheering for me in the sports festival when I won, but I don't think people are ready to have someone that they just viewed as powerless now become powerful. I just don't think they're ready for it. They're not as educated of a society as they should have been, just like they were hundreds of years ago. Well, I suppose you're right, Nessie would say. I actually, now that I think about it, don't think this world is ready for a quirkless hero either. But what does that mean you're going to do, Izuku? Because where this is going, I don't think you're trying to join Class 1A anymore. You'd be right there, Nezu, Izuku would say. I want to continue my pursuit of All for One and Shigaraki. I want to continue trying to find them in the shadows and not have my whereabouts be known by every person of the press. However, I would like to somehow teach a class here. A class? But you're only the age of the first years here. You couldn't even teach a class. The third years couldn't teach a class even if they wanted to. Nezu, you're forgetting. You're talking to me, Izuku, the person who somehow took down All for One, who All Might couldn't even do that. And I've studied my brain, and I've trained for something like this. I've trained to be a hero, and I could very well be a hero, if not for the society that I live in now. However, I feel like I should be able to teach the kids how they know how to do this. Nezu would be confused, but then would nod his head. So, I'm guessing you want to teach an all quirkless class then? Yes, but not all quirkless. A majority of them would be quirkless, and then there would be a select few who have weaker quirks. Say someone like Shinso, who has a quirk that can only work if someone were to answer one of his questions. That would also be a great category for a class I'd want to teach. It'd basically just be a basic self defense class just for the people that are quirkless so they can easily defend themselves against someone who may be trying to rob them. Nezu would be confused though. Izuku wanted to teach a class, however, he wanted to not be seen and wanted to hide in the shadows hunting Shigaraki. This simply could not have been done if Izuku were to teach a class at UA. So Nezu would then look at Izuku and would then come up with an explanation for what they should do, or at least something they should do so Izuku could teach at the high school. I have an idea, Nezu would say. We could possibly fake your death, so that all the kids in the Quirkless class, or the class you'd be teaching, wouldn't suspect you to be the Quirkless person that somehow took down All for One. You can say a villain supposedly hijacked a train, and while you were supposedly trying to stop them, they blew up the train and you inside. Sort of like just a bomber trying to get rid of you, just because the world wasn't ready, and the villains knew if you took down the king in the villain world, they needed you to be gone. Because they knew they couldn't take you down, even if they had very powerful quirks. You took down All for One, who none of them could even beat in groups. So, a faking death sort of thing would possibly work quite well. Izuku would shake his head, nodding. Yes, I do think that would work quite well, Nezu. So, I guess I'll have to supposedly be seen hopping onto a train, and then that train will blow up. Yes, that would work. So they would then start to plan out this sort of train hijacking, and then it would end up blowing up, faking Izuku's death, which would all happen as Izuku would end up never being seen again, and the press would end up thinking the Quirkless Wonder Child that had defeated All for One, the king in the villain world, had now sadly passed away. He would hold a public funeral to see if people really wanted a Quirkless hero, and to his surprise, a select few people had actually gone. All of the students in Class 1A had gone, and just a few sort of random people from the public. It was a lot less than he had thought and hoped. He thought that people would actually show up to mourn the death of somebody who had saved All Might's life. The number one hero had could have been killed if it wasn't for Izuku, and yet no one showed up to Izuku's faked funeral. Sure, it was a real funeral, but Izuku was still alive. So Izuku would then meet up with Nezu again, and this is where they would start to talk about what else they should do, like what Izuku should be hiding in, like a supportive costume or a disguise, and how he'll be teaching his students. So Nezu would end up giving Izuku a class. This would be Class 1Z, where Izuku would end up. Well, it wouldn't actually be called Class 1Z. I'm just gonna say it would be called Class. It would just be called Class Z, as he would take quirkless people and people with relatively weak quirks from all of the different classes throughout the 3 years that UA has. So Izuku would take kids from his 1C class, and he would also take kids from other classes, and he would combine them into this class, as Nezu would then tell them that they are going to be their just sort of schedule would be restructured, and they would be in a new homeroom and a new class. This class would where they would be training to supposedly become heroes, even though they had relatively weak quirks or were quirkless. They could opt out of this class anytime, which some of the students would. They didn't want to become heroes. In fact, those students who did opt out were all quirkless. Not all of the quirkless kids in the class opted out, but they knew they just didn't have it in them to become a hero, and so they decided to just opt out of the class. However, those remaining were all of the quirkless kids in his own Class 1C that he was in months prior, while also having a ton of other quirkless kids and just other kids with less strong quirks. However, there really wasn't as many of them as he would have liked. He wanted some kids with quirks so he can put them up against quirkless kids to see if the quirkless kids could beat somebody with a quirk. He just didn't know if they could or not. He didn't know who he was dealing with yet, as this was a just new batch of students he had basically pulled. Sure, he knew who the students were in Class 1C, but he didn't really know why or what they were up to, as it had been months since he last seen him. So much so that his voice had actually changed from then, so nobody even recognized who he was by his own voice. So Izuku would also be wearing a disguise just so no one realized that the quirkless wonder child that had defeated All for One just around a month ago had actually still been living and that his death was faked. He didn't want anyone to realize this. So at day, he would end up being teaching this class of quirkless kids just basic self-defense, so if anyone tried to bully them, rob them, or mug them, they could easily defend themselves, and at night he would go around searching for any traces of the villain group that he was once in. He knew if he ever tried to join them again, they would immediately try to kill him. He killed their leader, after all. He killed their master, who would plan out everything for them. He gained their trust and betrayed them, just like his mother had done to him. Izuku didn't like the fact that he betrayed the people that were his so called friends, but he knew it must be done in order for the greater common good. So Izuku would end up continue searching, but he wouldn't find out that Shigaraki had moved the villains just miles away from the city. Izuku had spent months searching in the city until realizing that he would probably need somebody to come with him, somebody hopefully with a quirk, and Izuku knew some type of device or quirk that he would have or need someone to have so he could find their base. Izuku knew that if it wasn't going to be in the city, it was probably going to be buried underground in the forest. And he needed some type of heat sensing thing so he could try to just see through something, or something like an X ray device so he can look down and see through the ground to see if there's any just cavities within the ground so that he could see if there were people hiding in there. And if he found one, it would most likely be the League of Villains. So Izuku would end up going to UA and asking Mei Hatsume if she could sort of make some type of heat detecting X-ray device that could be used to see underground. Mei Hatsume would be confused by this, but then would realize and knew that it was going to be a challenging task. And she had seen Izuku around, and she was even in Izuku's class. Sure, she was still in the support class, however, she was also in Izuku's self defense class, as she was deemed to have a not really suited quirk to basically have this self defense, and she couldn't have all of this tech on her at all times. And she actually wanted to join this class in the first place. There wasn't really any other self defense classes besides the hero classes that the hero kids had to take a just test to get into. So Mei Hatsume found this as a great advantage to join this class, and so she would like to help the teacher that had helped her. So she would immediately get to work making these X-ray glasses or goggles type thing so Izuku could end up finding the League of Villains. However, she did not know that that was Izuku's purpose at the time. So, just around 2 weeks would pass. Izuku had continued looking around the city, just making sure that no traces of a villain base was anywhere around there, just so he would be sure that he now has to search around the mountains and the forest to try to find their base. So, Izuku would end up thanking Hatsume for making the X ray glasses for him, as he would then begin his search. It would actually take tons of time, loads amount of time actually, as it had pretty much taken up the entire rest of the first year that Izuku was teaching there. It had still been the first year that Izuku could have been learning there, so Izuku basically finished up the first year of where Bakugo would be in class 1A, and he would then be moving to class 1 or class 2A. So Izuku would have taught them a ton in that time, and they would end up going up to sort of another level in this class. So Izuku would have two classes, the class advanced or class Z advanced and just regular class Z. This is where all the newcomers would end up going to, and all the graduates would end up leaving this class. However, all the kids in class, either in the year's first year or the second year, they would end up going to class Z advanced, while all of the rest of them who were just coming in now as the first years would end up going to that if they so choose. It wasn't a homeroom class no more. It had then turned into sort of an elective type class for quirkless kids to choose. So Izuku would continue teaching them, having no luck of finding Shigaraki and his base. Izuku, just around halfway through his second year teaching at UA, would end up going to get his hero license, which he would easily pass, and would end up registering as a hero with a strength quirk. However, Izuku would be hiding in the very low depths of the hero charts. He would be pretty much like one of the very last ranked heroes, and he had pretty much done nothing. This is where pretty much all of the other heroes had been just all of the new heroes had gone from. They'd start at the bottom and work their way up. It's exactly what All Might had done and Endeavor had done. So Izuku would just remain here. He would not even defeat a villain. He'd actually start his own hero agency just so he wouldn't be told off for not fighting anybody in his search for Shigaraki. So Izuku would, from time to time, defeat a few villains and would end up working his way up just to around the 75th hero. So he was categorized as a somewhat dangerous hero, but if you are a mid tier villain who could possibly defeat like the 50th or 49th level hero, then Izuku would be seen as a breeze and you could knock him out with one flick of your finger. So Izuku would remain here and would just only stop to fight villains if he saw them. If he didn't see, he wouldn't go out of his way to find it unless it was him trying to find Shigaraki's base. That is something he wanted to find, and he was going to find it at all costs. He knew if the fate of the world wanted to be intact in his lifetime, he would have to destroy the All for One Cork. And who had that cork? Shigaraki. So Izuku would have to find Shigaraki and end up destroying him so that he would not have to worry about it in his lifetime and he could retire at peace. So Izuku would end up going out every single night trying to look for Shigaraki, and he would just have horrible luck. He would not even find any traces of Shigaraki's base for 2 years. Bakugo, Kirishima, Todoroki, Momo, all the kids in Class 1A had already graduated from UA High School and had become heroes. Most of them, did I say heroes? Heroes, yeah. Most of them even passing Izuku on the hero chart, and Bakugo would be the number one hero after a year out of high school. He would have taken the spot of Endeavor, who had already just retired from being a hero. He knew that Todoroki was his next best chance at becoming the number one hero, and that he should just retire, as Todoroki was going to pass him, and after that he would have no chance of becoming the number one hero, and he would just have to be stuck with the long-time number two hero just role. So Todoroki would then be trying to get above Bakugo in the hero class and would be trying to get to number one as the hero. However, Izuku would see them and would know if he was going to find Shigaraki's base, he would need to enlist their help. So Izuku would go to the hero agencies, telling them who he was and what he needed them to do. Now, obviously, the hero agencies weren't too just happy with like the number one and number two hero going out to help this 75 ranked hero, and sure, he was supposedly seen as more experienced than them since he was in the hero business for longer than them. They just thought he was some unexperienced person that had been a veteran in the hero ranks. He had been there for years and supposedly tried to work his way up to number one, but could only manage to keep the 75th rank. So they were not so thrilled to do this. However, they thought it would actually be good publicity to have the number one and number two hero be working alongside the number 75th hero. They thought it would be great publicity and to show that Bakugo and Todoroki, who had been seen as just the lone wolf type of hero, to be seen working with another hero that would supposedly be not as seen as on their level, just chosen to work with them. So Izuku would be told that they would agree and would have Todoroki and Bakugo come to his hero agency as soon as they could. So just about a week would pass with Izuku waiting, as he would then hear the door be knocked, as they would then walk in to see this massive, just open space. It was completely empty, besides just a couch and a couple of chairs with a coffee table just separating the two. So Izuku would sit down on the couch, as he would then ask both Todoroki and Bakugo to sit down. Both of them would agree, as they would then ask what Izuku, well, they didn't know it was Izuku, but they would ask what Izuku had wanted them to do. Izuku told them if they were, or he asked them if they remembered the fight with All for One, to which they would be surprised. It was supposedly thought to be kept as secretive as possible. UA and All Might had made an effort to try to erase it from everyone's minds, and after 4 years from it happening, it had pretty much just been forgotten, with very few people actually remembering it, and if anyone brought it up, they would just be seen as crazy. So when Izuku had brought it up, both of Todoroki and Bakugo would jump up and yell, how the hell do you remember that? Or how do you know that? Which Izuku would just say that he was there, and that he was the one to defeat All for One. And this is where Bakugo and Todoroki would both realize that it was Zuku, as Zuku would then take off his mask and would finally tell them, I know we don't have the greatest of paths, or the greatest of pasts, but I would like you to help me. Help me find Shigaraki and destroy All for One. If it remains, we will not be able to live on successfully as a society. It will always come back and linger around destroying cities. And Shigaraki, the host now of All for One, will continue to do this. Both Bakugo and Todoroki would agree with Izuku and would end up asking Izuku how they're going to find this base, as they presumed Izuku had been searching for the base for months. Izuku would then toss them both a pair of goggles, which were the same X-ray goggles that Hatsume had made Izuku, and she was now a very famous just support type of hero. She would still be a hero. However, it would be much more of a supporter role who would help the heroes by making gadgets for them. So, with that, Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki would then be just set out into the mountains looking for their base. And remember how I said Shigaraki had moved the base miles away, and they have been planning an attack for years. They had not built up an army, but they built an attack that would surely work, even if they had only a couple of members, being Shigaraki, Kurogiri, Dabi, and Toga. They had trained for as long as possible, trying to just make their quirks as strong as possible. And Izuku didn't let out of his training either. He had gotten to the point where he was very easily stronger than All Might and was much quicker to him. Remember, Izuku had just gotten this training. He had gotten to the point where he could destroy robots in 10 months of training. And now, if he just completely quadruples that, almost 10 times his training, he would completely just be unstoppable. And this is exactly what Izuku had done. He had made himself unstoppable. But Shigaraki would be a very hard fight, and Izuku knew that. So, after just about a week of them camping miles away from the city, they would end up finding something. And this would finally be it. The just place where they had been searching for a week, and Izuku had been searching for 3 years. So Izuku would ask them all a very important question. Should we go in and fight them all alone, the three of us? Or should we wait and try to get back up here? Both Todoroki and Bakugo would think for a moment and would just say this is a great question. Should they go in and possibly risk their lives, or get a ton of heroes and they would know it would be a very easy fight? Now, Bakugo, being quite arrogant of his powers, would say that he would go in guns blazing for the glory and would defeat them all by himself, which Izuku would stop him. Bakugo, these villains have been training for years. We have no clue if they have an army down there or if it's just them. They could have possibly rigged this entire thing with traps, too. We don't know. So Izuku would end up placing a bomb right by where the entrance was of this secretive base in the forest, as he would then blow the door open, as both Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki would all walk in, as they would then look around to see an empty, just sort of bar type look, as they would then see Kurogiri right on the bar, just trying to clean a couple of glasses. Now, Kurogiri isn't really an offensive type of person. He doesn't have an offensive type of quirk. So Kirigiri would immediately try to warp out, hopefully trying to warn the others who were in far off rooms in this bunker that All for One had prepared before he gotten taken down by Izuku. However, this was not possible as Izuku would jump in and would grab just this sort of metal thing that Bakugo had grabbed, I believe, in the USJ, where Izuku would start to pull it apart, ripping the steel just completely into tiny bits, as Izuku would continue doing that until Kurogiri would just be seen laying there, not being able to move. Now, this was the thing that would keep Kurogiri stable, and without it, he would just become completely unstable and would not be able to use his quirk, just being there flat on the ground, just not moving at all. So Izuku would tell them that they should not split up and they should stick in groups, as they don't know if they're all training together or separately. So they would continue to walk around as they would then find a room. It was sort of a padded room with like the pads you would find in sort of like a gym where they would like jump around on the walls or something, like a gymnastics place. So Izuku would end up looking around as they would then see somebody staring right at them. This would be Toga, as Izuku would tell them he'll deal with it and that they should go on without him. So Izuku would then look down at Toga as she would then glance up at Izuku. So, you finally come back, Izuku. I thought you'd never come back after you betrayed us. Izuku would just sort of awkwardly laugh as Izuku would launch right at Toga, which she would do herself. She had gotten quite fast since the last time Izuku had saw him, or saw her. Izuku had trained for years, and so did she. So of course she was bound to get a lot stronger. So Izuku would look at her and would then tell her she doesn't have to do this, as he could save her from this path of villainy. She can become a hero, as Izuku, to his knowledge, she hasn't did any horrible acts of villainy just yet. However, Toga wouldn't listen, jumping right at Izuku as if trying to attack him, which Izuku would easily dodge and would then put her in a chokehold and would then knock her clean unconscious. Sure, she was a very worthy opponent, but she just couldn't compare to somebody like Izuku who had completely broken just his limiters that had been holding all of the kids with quirks back. So Izuku would continue to move on as he would then smell something burning. Izuku would look on in the room as he would then see Todoroki and Dabi fighting. Izuku would hop into the room asking if Todoroki needed any help, which Todoroki would tell Izuku yes, that he needed a lot of help. Dabi had gotten extremely strong over the years he had been training, and so had Todoroki. They were completely evenly matched and were in a stalemate. So Izuku would hop in and would start to trying to help Todoroki fight Dabi. Dabi would end up sending massive amounts of fire, which would burn both himself and Izuku and Todoroki. It was sort of like a double-edged sword, as he would go for an attack, hurting his opponent while also hurting himself. It was not a very good move to use such massive amounts of fire. However, most of these massive amounts of flames were not really reaching either Izuku or Todoroki. Todoroki would send a massive iceberg just blocking this blue flame that Dabi was sending. Sure, the blue flame would end up melting the ice, but so the ice would just end up coming right back by the use of Todoroki. So it would end up putting a toll on both Dabi and Todoroki, to where Izuku could tell they were both visibly weaker. And sure, they were both insanely strong people, but they were not as smart as they should have been. Izuku knew that Todoroki wasn't really a hand-to-hand fighter, and if he was, he would know that both of Dabi and Todoroki's quirks, they would have to end up fighting close range, as long range would end up just knocking both of their staminas out and would end up defeating them after a while. So Izuku would jump in before Todoroki could use all of his stamina and would punch Dabi right across the face, sending him into a wall. And with Dabi already exhausted, he would end up being knocked out, as Izuku would then restrain him and Toga and would end up locking them in a room with a key he had found. So Izuku would look over at Todoroki and would end up helping him back up to his feet. He had dropped down after Izuku had knocked Tabi unconscious. So Izuku would take Todoroki and would help him onto a seat and would give Todoroki a glass of water, as they would then continue on to their journey, trying to look for where Bakugo had ran off to and where Shigaraki could quite possibly be. They would end up running through a hallway where they would end up seeing this massive open room, as they would look around to see Shigaraki standing over the unconscious body of Bakugo, who would look to be beaten quite bad. Todoroki would take one step forward, as Shigaraki's head would immediately jolt towards him and would end up knocking him right out with a single punch, as Isuku would then be staring at an unconscious body of Todoroki while Shigaraki was holding an unconscious body of Bakugo by the neck. As Izuku would then run right at Shigaraki, only to get a punch right to the stomach. Isuku had not known this, but All For One had transferred all of his quirks, including All For One, into Shigaraki, and Shigaraki had trained every single one of those quirks that he could possibly find. So Isuku was now facing an insane match, as Izuku didn't know what to do, and before he could even get up, would end up being punched repeatedly and would continue just being slapped across the room, as Izuku would be slammed into a wall and would then be slammed into the wall across the room in just the next second. He was completely blown away by the strength Shigaraki had had. Now, Izuku, in all of his training, had built up an insane amount of durability. He could take crazy punches, just like how Shigaraki had been giving him for the past 2 minutes. So finally, when Izuku would get a chance, he would put everything into one punch. All of his power would go right into this punch that he had, as Izuku would run right at Shigaraki, dodging every single one of his attacks. It was an amazing feat that Izuku didn't know if he could do, and finally, when he reached right to Shigaraki, Izuku would punch him right in the stomach, launching him flying into the back wall, sending him through the wall and into the rock behind it, shattering Shigaraki's back as Shigaraki would fall down limp to the floor. His back and spine had just been shattered into a billion pieces. No amount of regeneration quirks could fix something as brutal and just terrifying as that injury Shigaraki had just suffered. So Isuku would then look down at Shigaraki and would tell him, "I'm sorry, Shigaraki, but you cannot leave this place." As Shigaraki would then barely look up at Izuku, trying and begging Izuku with his eyes not to kill him, but Izuku knew what must be done, as Izuku quickly and swiftly would end the life of Shigaraki, while simultaneously ending the life of All For One, as Izuku, now just drained of energy, having put it all into that single punch that had just destroyed Shigaraki, as Izuku would pick up both Todoroki and Bakugo and would take them out of the base, leaving both Dabi and Toga there, just hopefully to escape and go on with their lives after seeing Shigaraki's body laying there, and would realize that they couldn't beat somebody like Izuku, Bakugo, or Todoroki no matter how hard they tried. So Izuku would return to civilization with Bakugo and Todoroki, as right before Izuku could make it, he would end up falling right outside of a hospital, completely knocked out. This was now where his limits were at. He was completely drained of energy, and so was Bakugo and Todoroki, having been knocked out by Shigaraki. Years would end up passing, and Zuko would finally say that he was the Quirkless child and that he was the Quirkless hero. And this was, of course, the day that Izuku would be ranked as the number one hero. After rising throughout the ranks, both Bakugo and Todoroki would end up being at the second and third place spots, respectively, as Izuku would now be the first hero to ever be Quirkless, while also being the number one hero and to be Quirkless. And Quirkless didn't mean powerless no more. It had actually meant you had a special ability which would cause you to be able to break your limits. And that's where this what if will be finished, guys. I hope you all enjoyed this what if, and I did too. And remember, please comment your what if suggestions down in the comments section below, as I'm going to hopefully get some ideas from them, and so I will end up making my next what if off of hopefully some of your comments down in the comment section of this video. Remember, if you see a what if suggestion, comment or like that comment so I know you all want to see a video of that, or just comment down your what if suggestion to have a chance of it becoming a what if of mine. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy my what if, or this what if of what if Deku stayed Quirkless. I hope you all enjoyed it. Remember, this was Anime Outlet. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.